Jessica, when you put that question out to us earlier, I didn't have to think more than once to come up with the answer. How to give feedback. It is such a simple thing to do. It's easy to practice. You can do it in a peer relationship, but we just don't tell managers how to do that. And as we're seeing the shift in performance management these days, where younger employees definitely, they want feedback. They don't want the scorecard annual review that we give them every year. They want feedback. They want to know right now, how am I doing? I just finished this project. How did I do? And we just don't train managers how to have that conversation with their employees.
Welcome to the Workology Podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller-Merrill, founder of Workology.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of Workology.
Welcome to the Workology Podcast, sponsored by ACHR Exam and Upskill HR. These are two of the courses that we offer for HR certification prep and recertification for human resources leaders. In 2018, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics found that companies with fewer than 100 employees gave only 12 minutes of manager training every 6 months. Organizations with 100 to 500 employees provided just 6 minutes of new manager training. And this comes from HR Professionals magazine. Also, according to Gallup's State of the American Manager, Analytics and Advice for Leaders, 50% of employees have left their jobs, including myself, because of a manager. We had to get away at some point in their careers. So I'm included in this list. Maybe you are too. Additionally, only 35% of U.S. managers are engaged in their jobs, and managers who are not engaged or who are actively disengaged are costing the U.S. economy $319 billion to $398 billion annually. Billion with a B. This obviously is a costly problem that just keeps getting more complicated when you put remote work into the mix. So before I introduce today's podcast guests, I do want to hear from you. Text the word podcast to 512-548-3005. Ask questions, leave comments, and make suggestions for future guests. This is my community text number, and I want to hear from you. I am pleased to have on this podcast Cornelia Gamlem and Barbara Mitchell. The duo collaborated on their first book, The Big Book of HR, one of my favorite books. It hit the market in 2012. Since that time, Barbara and Cornelia have gone on to write multiple books, including the Essential Workplace Conflict Handbook, the Conflict Resolution Phrase Book, and the award-winning The Manager's Answer Book. And they did what? Unbelievable Tales from the Workplace. They have a new book out called The Decisive Manager. I'm going to link to this book in the show notes of today's podcast episode. Cornelia took the HR expertise she gained from working for a Fortune 500 IT services company and founded the GEMS Group, a management consulting firm offering client solutions in the areas of employee relations, workplace diversity, and related HR business issues. Barbara is the founder and managing partner of the Mitchell Group, a management consulting practice that helps a wide variety of clients with people and talent management issues. Cornelia and Barbara, welcome to the Workology Podcast.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on. And I told you in the prep call, I love the Big Book of HR. It's such a valuable resource. I didn't realize that you had so many books published, and how you collaborate together is a whole nother podcast. But I am excited to have you on the podcast to talk about manager training and how we can help support these business leaders.
We're delighted to be here. The subject that you just talked about is just so critical. And we are absolutely, like you, we're horrified how little training people get.
And I'm reminded every day, because I feel like a lot of the questions that I get from social media and in the email and on my blog and various places are related to bad managers.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into all that, let's start with some background. And how did your past experience lead you to partner in your first book together and now subsequent books?
Well, as you mentioned, we both had a background in HR management, both held leadership positions, and we knew each other professionally. We were both very much involved with the Society for Human Resource Management, as well as other local business groups. And, we lived close to each other in the Washington, D.C. area. So we had gotten together professionally on a number of occasions. And then we both started our consulting practices around the same time. And, that gave us more of an opportunity to get together. And that professional relationship grew into a great friendship. And sometime, I guess it was in 2011, Barbara came to me. She had submitted a proposal to her publisher. She had published another book with a different colleague, and they gave her a very short time span to write the big book of HR. As we joke, it's a big book. And so she asked me to help, if I'd be interested in helping her write. And I said, sure, I'll give it a try. Always wanted to write a book. And as we say, the rest is history.
Well, I love it. And I mean, I am working on now my third book, and I'm just thinking about how it would be to collaborate with someone as a co-author. And like I said, that's a whole another podcast interview that we could talk more about. I want to get back to statistics because they are scary and expensive, big numbers, billions with a B, especially for HR professionals who I think are interested in their own career development, maybe as becoming managers or working with different managers. I wanted to ask you, what should we be thinking about first with regards to professional development?
I think the main thing we should be thinking about is, what do people need today to change the way we are? Our working world is just so different, and we can't just do things the way we've always done them. And so what does your workforce need? What do your managers need most of all? And I think they're just some very basic things that managers now need to be so much more empathetic. They need to be so much more in tune with listening to what their employees have to say, and then working on what's going to work for us today to make us as good as we can be, and not revert back to perhaps what they did even just before the pandemic, when things maybe were going okay. But in the numbers that you gave, Jessica, it doesn't sound like people have been paying attention to their employees even before we had a worldwide pandemic. So we need to get back to that and say, it is not intuitive to be a good manager. You need some help. And yes, there are some very basic things I think people need to learn. But there's also just what is right for my team right now. How can I help them be the best that they can be?
Cornelia, do you have anything to add to the conversation in this
I
area?
would say the only thing I would add for HR professionals is make sure you understand the business, understand the business that your organization is in, gain some basic knowledge of other functional areas in business. And I think that's where so many HR people fall short, because they think, well, I'm great at HR, but I don't understand what some of the managers I support, the issues that they're dealing with from a functional basis.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about the business of things. Barbara, anything to add here?
I've got a great story that I share all the time that very quickly happens. When I was at Marriott, there was a wonderful woman named Pam Farr, who was the highest ranking woman at Marriott at the time. And she was the senior VP of HR reporting to Bill Marriott. And she would tell a story about how she would wait 20 minutes in a staff meeting. So there would be the CFO and the CHRO and the chief marketing officer. All the chiefs would be there. She would time herself 20 minutes before she would bring up a people issue. She would participate in the marketing conversation. She'd participate in the finance because she understood the business. Now, when I share that story with a lot of HR people, they think that I mean literally you have to time it 20 minutes and then it's okay to talk about HR. No, that's not the point. The point is that you want to learn the business. You want to know the business as well as the other leaders in your organization. And then, and only then, because we know you can't do anything without the people in the organization. And then you can bring up whatever it is about benefits that you need to talk about. But I think Cornelia makes a really good point that that's one of the areas that HR needs to get better at, and that is understanding the business.
Well, I love that we're starting right off on business, because this is a huge gap for us as HR professionals. And I think that I know if we want more credibility with our peers, members of the executive team, we have to understand their businesses to establish that trust and build that relationship. So I love that that's what we're starting off with when it comes to HR leaders and their professional development.
Absolutely right.
The past few years have put a lot of pressure on those of us in HR, everyone, but especially HR, and also on new managers in particular. I wanted to ask if you could talk about how managing a remote workforce is a different skill set than managing a team in person.
One of the things we keep hearing and talking to folks about is managers have a lot of anxiety because they can't walk around and see what people are doing. And, I often wonder, are they just insecure, or nobody has told them that there are other ways to manage, and kind of taken them by the hand and said, this is how we're going to do it from now on. The use of technology is so important these days, but you have to be able to use it right, not to be spying on your employees or be measuring some of those productivity issues that really don't contribute to the outcomes of the organization, things like keystrokes per minute or the numbers of calls that somebody has made. Think about how you can manage workflow with the use of technology. And that's a wonderful way to keep up with where your team is on different projects. And if somebody's struggling with something, it's easy to kind of come in. So it's important that you kind of move away from the thought pattern of, I'm into the busy work, I'm concerned about the tasks. Worry about whether or not people are meeting their deadlines and they're making their goals. The other thing that's so important and goes hand in hand with this and feeds right into how we train our managers, they have to learn how to communicate the performance expectations that they have for their employees, for the project, for the team. And that has to be done constantly. Use video calls, either for team meetings or for one-on-one meetings, but go into those calls with an agenda. Know what you're going to be talking about, and not just have it be the stream of consciousness. Kind of the way we set things up today, you gave us a sense of how the conversation was going to go. So I think that's really important. And then finally, provide opportunities for the employees to network with each other, even virtually, because we learn so much from our peers.
And I think one of the things that this is a constant issue for me, that I think it was always important. But one of the things that's different now in our virtual world is managers have to learn how to listen a whole lot differently and a whole lot better to their people, so that they really are in tune with what is going on in the people's lives. And it's not just, I need you to do this task. Here's what I'm expecting of you. Here's how I'm going to measure it. Here's how you'll be rewarded. It's, how does this all fit together? How do we work together and really have something that matters in our organizations? And I think that's one of the things that is, I'm going to use the word frightening to a lot of managers who can't get the fact that they have to do things a little bit differently. And I think it's going to probably continue to be an issue of people leaving managers because they just can't get the work done that they want to get done with that manager. So listening becomes a skill that is more and more and more important. And then the other thing that I think is so critical, and something that we talk a lot about in the books that we write, is just how you get to know your employees, the compassion. I think we used that word a moment ago. How you just get to know them and what it is that's happening in their lives. And I think a lot of managers are afraid of that whole thing. But I will say it quite succinctly, and that is you need to treat your employees like human beings first, then employees. And I think if we do that, I think we'll have less of the people leaving because their managers are not managing appropriately.
I think a lot of our employees, younger employees, have seen our parents be miserable working in work environments, and we have taught them, as we should, to not put up with those kind of things or to make a change. And I see this in my 14-year-old daughter and the way she carries herself and does the things that she does. And that is incredibly frustrating for managers or leaders who have always operated a certain way. But they probably, I'm assuming that they might also have children, are raising a generation of kids to maybe do the same thing in their own life. We just don't have that personal relationship to say, hey, this employee is a parent, a sister, an aunt, a sibling, to see them that way.
Very true. Yeah.
The other thing that you mentioned, Cornelia, which I really liked, is the agenda. And it's something that I have been incorporating into my own meetings. It helps me be organized when I'm leading my team. Here are the 5 things that we're talking about today, but it also helps them stay focused and organized. And it's a small activity. It doesn't take me that long to do, but it will really make a difference in terms of the order of operations for the meeting. And I think how my team feels.
Absolutely. And I'm sitting here chuckling to myself because I have a board meeting tonight. And while the president of the organization always sends out an agenda, she cannot help herself. She has got to weigh in on everything that is on the agenda. And, you just want to scream and say, get out of people's way. You've put the agenda together. You've got competent people around you. Let them talk about what's going on, issues, problems, successes, whatever. And I think that's another real skill that we have to train our managers to do is, not only have an agenda, know how to stick to it, but also to be able to elicit some responses from everybody else. So everyone's participating.
And then listen to what they say.
And actually take action, maybe
Yes.
a change or even a small adjustment can really go a long way.
Absolutely. Yes.
We talked a little bit about compassion, and I mentioned trust at the beginning. But I think the idea, or I know that many managers think that people who work from home or you're managing a team remotely, that people are messing around and they're not working when they're supposed to be working, or they're working another job. I'm seeing that in the news a lot. In terms of what you are seeing in your work and in the book, how important is trust in being an effective manager, whether it's remote teams or in person, in your experience?
Can I just say it's everything? I can't think of much that's more important than being able to have a trusting relationship with managers and staff. And it isn't something that just happens when you wave your magic wand and say, trust me. It has to be earned. And I think it's not rocket science. It's not difficult. It is just basically doing what you say you're going to do, being responsible. If you're the manager, that if I say that we're going to do this today, our staff meeting is going to be at this time, and I'm going to hold to it, that people can trust you. They know that you will do what you say that you will do. And the same thing for employees. I think that managers have to be able to trust their employees and get to know them again as the human being that they are. And maybe sometimes it may take a little bit of time for that trust relationship to develop, but it can be broken so easily by just not doing what you said you were going to do, or by doing something that is perhaps unethical, illegal, whatever that we see so often now in the media. So being a trustworthy person and acting in a trustworthy way, but then also building trust with your employees, it's just everything. And without it, I think that we're going to have a difficult time as we try to navigate this this very different workplace that we have.
Yeah, I was going to say nothing can kill an organization and crush the culture when trust somehow goes away or somebody misuses trust. I had a situation a few months back. I was working with an organization, and it turned out one of the senior leaders had decided that she didn't like one of her colleagues, had a letter of no confidence written up and started to get other people to sign this letter, went around the CEO and took it to the board, and just all hell broke loose. Yes, I mean, it was just, I mean, I was sitting there with my mouth open, like, really, when I heard the story. But, now they're grappling. She's been moved out into another position, and so she's at least not dealing with people directly, but she's still there in the organization. And they've got a lot of work to do to bring that trust factor back, because, even some of the people that were coerced into signing this letter of no confidence later admitted, well, we really didn't know what it was about, but, since she asked us to sign it, we thought we had to. And it's almost destroying a lot of the working relationships in that organization.
Hard to come back from something like
Yes.
that. Let's take a reset here. My name is Jessica Miller Merrill, and you are listening to the Workology Podcast, sponsored by ACE the HR Exam and Upskill HR. Today, we're talking about new manager training and new authors of The Decisive Manager. I'm talking with Cornelia Gamlem and Barbara Mitchell. They have other books, The Big Book of HR and The Manager's Answer Book, among others. Before we get back to their interview, I would love your feedback as well. Text podcast to 512-548-3005. Ask me questions, leave comments, make suggestions for future guests. This is my community text number, and I want to hear from you. Personal and professional development is essential for successful HR leaders. Join Upskill HR to access live training, community, and over 100 on-demand courses for the dynamic leader. HR Research credits available. Visit upskillhr.com for more. I want to switch gears a little bit and go back to new managers, because I feel like this is such an impressionable opportunity for somebody who's newly either coming to the organization as a new manager, or maybe somebody who is promoted internally from into a manager position. So I wanted to ask, what is the most commonly overlooked skill that you feel like new managers need that isn't always offered or in terms of training by companies?
Jessica, when you put that question out to us earlier, I didn't have to think more than once to come up with the answer: how to give feedback. It is such a simple thing to do. It's easy to practice. You can do it in a peer relationship, but we just don't tell managers how to do that. And as we're seeing the shift in performance management these days, where younger employees definitely, they want feedback. They don't want the scorecard annual review that we give them every year. They want feedback. They want to know right now, how am I doing? I just finished this project. How did I do? And we just don't train managers how to have that conversation with their employees.
And it's, as you mentioned, Cornelia, it's not difficult to do if you know just a simple way of, if you see somebody doing something really great, that you right then and there just say, hey, I just saw today in the staff meeting, when you added that comment about the XYZ, it changed the whole dynamic. Thank you for saying what you did. And that is just going to do absolute wonders for that employee. And certainly if someone does something that isn't exactly right, or they could do it better, that you very quickly, privately, of course, public praise is great, but private, if you're correcting someone, of course, but let them know what it is that they did that wasn't exactly right, how they could fix it, and that you're there to support them. And I think if managers do that, feedback, it will just change the whole organization, and people will want to do a great job. And then I think something that gets overlooked over and over and over, and that is just simply being grateful to employees for doing a good job. I think what most people want more than anything else is have their managers say, thanks, thank you. What you did today was really worthwhile, or thank you for just being reliable. I really can count on you. That just means everything, and probably will make that employee's day, first of all, maybe their week, maybe their year. And then another thing to do, I think is so easy to do, but just doesn't get done very often, is an email, a thank you email, a quick, something that's appropriate. I know going back to my Marriott days, this was back in the days when you used to get a handwritten note. But if you ever got a note from Bill Marriott or some executive, I mean, people put those up on their walls and they had them there forever and ever and ever. And it's just a simple thing that probably took 5 minutes for somebody to write it, but it was worth everything. And I think this thank you is what people are looking for.
And getting back to feedback for just a second, I often talk about this simple formula, what, as Barbara just said, pointing out what you noticed, what was great, what wasn't so great. So what, which is what was the impact of what you just noticed? So people understand not just, oh, gee, I did a great job, but they understand why it was a great job. And then the final one is now what? What can we do to continue doing this, or what corrective action needs to get taken if you're talking about something negative? It's such an easy little formula, and it's easy for a manager to grasp onto. And I think if we just gave them some of those kinds of tools and training, we'd see them giving a lot more feedback to their staffs.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about my daughter again, 14. She's a competitive swimmer, and it is critical for them to get feedback in practice regularly, because when they go to a meet and they haven't received any feedback, they don't know any different. And just like managers, leaders, when we give feedback to somebody on our team, one small correction early on can change everything. And when I think about like repetitive motion, because again, my daughter's a swimmer, so we were talking about this the other week about like repetitive motion injuries, and she's like, oh, what you mean, Mom, is the difference between why we switch breath on either side when we're doing like the freestyle stroke. And I'm like, yeah, because if you did it on just one side, it's going to lead to not only a slower time for you, but physical injury and problems later on. So feedback can be the same way. That it's a muscle that and how we do our day and activities, like those things are learned. So if we don't have feedback, we are operating only taking a breath while we're doing our freestyle on one side, when a simple, quick 30-second conversation could change everything for a member of your team.
Very, very true. Love that. I love that swimming example is so relevant to,
I feel like that's what they live for. Like that's all and it was hard at the beginning. Like she didn't like the feedback because it felt like a personal attack. Like she wasn't good enough. But once you understand that it is designed to not only help you, but also help maybe the relationship or the team, like it's a give and take, and then you can make a modification and ask for more, and you can see it change, in terms of your times, like then it's like, oh, okay, this was so much better. And now I understand. And I think that if we look at feedback in that way, as a manager leader, it might not impact your performance today, but over time, 60, 90, a year from now, you're able to see the difference in their performance. It just takes 30 seconds to give somebody some insights into how they could improve or what you want from them in the future.
Yes.
I also think that it's good for managers to ask for feedback themselves. Ask their employees, how am I doing? What can I do to help support you better? And it takes a secure manager to do that, but it really can pay off. Both manager can learn a lot by having an employee say, I really appreciate it when you say X to me. It really helped me do a better job. And then you can do more of that. So I think managers need to ask for feedback themselves.
I love that. And I think if feedback is a gift. It doesn't always feel that way sometimes. Sometimes it stings, but I try to say that to myself when I ask to receive it, like this is a gift and they don't have to give it to me. Oftentimes people don't give feedback because they're worried it will hurt your feelings, or they don't want you to get angry or upset or have negative emotions. But really it's designed for you to improve performance, your swim stroke, whatever it is.
Exactly. Yep. Well said.
I wanted to ask, going back to new managers. So let's pretend that we have a bunch of new managers who are listening to this podcast right now. What advice can you give them to build solid relationships with their teams? How should they start?
Well, I think you start by getting to know the people that work for you in terms of what's important to them, what their passions are. I love the idea of just spending one-on-one time with new employees and getting to know them, and maybe having some fun together as a team. I think teams that are strongest are the ones who enjoy spending time together and working together. And you can't do that unless you know each other and know each other well. So I think it starts from there. But it also starts with something that Cornelia and I talk about, like it's like this. We made this up. We didn't, but we pretend like we did. And that is, if the manager sets expectations, lets the new hire know what it is that I expect of you. What is it that you can do to really do a good job and be a superstar and get promoted and all the things that people want? What are the expectations? And then you hold them accountable for the work that they have done, and not get in their way, not micromanage, but the simple formula of set expectations and hold accountable. We say sometimes that if managers would just do that, they wouldn't have to do anything else. That pretty much covers the whole basis. Now, those are not simple things, I know, but I think you need to let your employees know what you expect of them. And then you have to be there for them if they need help and they know they can trust you. There's trust again, that you will be there to help them and you want them to succeed. And then you hold them accountable. If they don't live up to your expectations, there's the constructive feedback. You share why and how they can get better. And then making sure that you've got good people. I say this all the time, that good people want to work with good people. So if you have people that are just not pulling their weight and somebody else has to do their job for them, odds are you're going to lose 2 employees in that equation and maybe more, because the good employee does not want to do somebody else's job too.
And I think the other piece of advice I would give a new manager is, when you hire someone new, it starts with the onboarding process. I mean, even before the person sets foot in the building, whether it's physically or virtually, reach out to them. I mean, once that job offer has been accepted, let them know how glad you are to have them be joining the team, and get other people on the team involved too. Have them reach out, have them email them or text people, so they feel like they're part of something bigger as soon as they walk into the building, or as soon as they start working. I can't think of a better way to start to build relationships, not just one-on-one, but with the team in general. And if you're a new manager coming into an organization, you can be doing the same thing. Start reaching out to folks as soon as you have their contact information, and let them know how glad you are and how excited you are to be working with them. It'll go so far to say, hey, I'm that individual, I'm that human being. Don't just think of me as the authority figure here. I'm not just the boss. I want to be part of the team as well. And yes, I've got some responsibilities to lead everybody, but I really want to be part of the team as well.
I love that. So I want a last question for y'all. How can HR leaders get their organizations involved in a formal new manager training program? It sounds, things are changing so quickly. I do think that all managers should go through training. So how can HR get that started at their organization or expand?
Well, I think you've given some real good statistics here that I hope everybody is either writing down or getting from your blog, because we know that that's how leaders learn. They love when you give them numbers and say, okay, we're losing a lot of our managers. We've got a problem. So you get their attention, and then once you get their attention, you better have a plan in mind as to how they can get what they need. Have some classes, or having some coaching, or whatever it is that you think will work with your employees. There's so many ways for people to learn these days, with micro learning and gamification and all the fun ways that people can learn, YouTube, and I mean, everything that's available. We'd like to hope that people can look at our books if as ways for people to learn. But there are so many ways for people to learn, and learn the way that they can learn themselves. So I think you have to get the leader's attention, and then be prepared to step up with some solutions if you're the HR person.
And I think another way that you can get the leader's attention is give them examples of things that have gone wrong. If this manager had understood how to give better feedback, for example, maybe the whole project wouldn't have been blown, but it came in late, it came in over budget. Think of what we could have done if we had just invested a little bit of money or even time, as Barbara said. We don't have to send people off to conferences and big expensive learning events these days. So give them some other credible examples along with the numbers. And I think together it starts to paint a really good story for why do we need something like this? I almost hate that we're still having this conversation, that we all know how it goes. And I remember having a discussion or semi-argument with somebody once at a social event, talking about, the industry he was in. And he's telling me, no, this is just particular to our industry. And I looked at him and I said, I've worked with a lot of different companies across a lot of industries. The biggest mistake they make is they find the best person who's good at whatever it is they're doing, the best engineer, the best widget maker, and say, oh, we're going to make them a manager. And they may have no people skills and may not want to have any people skills, but they get thrown into these positions. So we have, I think, first of all, let people know what's involved. If you're tapping them on the shoulder and saying, we want you to apply for this internal management position. And focus on what's really what their day-to-day life is going to be like, not just you get to keep on being, the best of what you were doing, because now you're in a whole new job.
Well, I have a copy of their new book, The Decisive Manager, and I would suggest that you add it to your reading library, maybe slide it into every one of your managers' desks, or send it on over to the mail to make it part of their regular reading. I love to do those kinds of things for my team. I believe that there's always opportunities to learn and grow. And sometimes the best way to introduce something new is through the genius or ideas of others, like Barbara and Cornelia. So I know how hard it is to write a book. I know how much time it is. And I thank you guys for tackling this topic, because it is one that seems to be sticking around. And so the more resources we have to share with our managers, hopefully we can make a dent in this productivity that is stemming from bad managers and leadership. So thank you so much for your time here on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is really important for HR leaders to create resources and support for new managers, especially around leadership, empathy, people management, communication, productivity, and more. I am so excited about Cornelia and Barbara's new book, The Decisive Manager, and their willingness to share with us their expertise today. I'm including their new book in the show notes, as well as links to all their other books in the resources section of this podcast episode. Text the word podcast to 512-548-3005. You can give me feedback, ask questions, and make suggestions for future guests. This is my community number, and I want to hear from you. Thank you also for joining the Workology Podcast, which is sponsored by Upskill HR and ACE the HR Exam. This podcast is for the disruptive workplace leader who's tired of the status quo. My name is Jessica Miller Merrill. Until next time, visit Workology.com to listen to all our previous podcast episodes.